Daniel Carter's alarm rang every morning at 5:30, long before the sun appeared over the quiet neighborhood. While most of the city was still asleep, he was already in the small kitchen packing a lunchbox for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She loved peanut butter sandwiches cut into stars, and no matter how difficult life became, Daniel never forgot the tiny details that made her smile. Only a year earlier, his mornings had looked completely different. He had worn crisp shirts, driven to a modern office, and managed a team at one of the city's fastest-growing technology companies. 12 years of dedication had earned him respect, promotions, and the belief that loyalty always mattered. Then one 15-minute meeting changed everything. The company announced a massive restructuring. Employees were called into private offices one by one. When Daniel's turn came, the young CEO briefly thanked him for his service before sliding a termination letter across the table. "It's nothing personal," the CEO said without meeting his eyes. "We're moving in a different direction." Those words echoed in Daniel's mind for weeks. He searched tirelessly for another management position, attending interviews, updating his resume, and sending countless applications. Some employers said he was overqualified. Others never responded at all. As savings disappeared and rent became harder to pay, he accepted work delivering groceries across the city. The job paid far less than his old salary, but it allowed him to keep Lily safe and fed. Every evening she greeted him at the door with the same question. "Did you have a good day, Dad?" Daniel always smiled before answering. "I did, because I get to come home to you." He never wanted his daughter to carry the weight of adult worries. After dropping Lily at school each morning, Daniel often noticed his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, struggling to bring groceries inside or sweep the leaves from her porch. Her hands shook from arthritis, yet she insisted on living independently after losing her husband several years earlier. One afternoon, without being asked, Daniel quietly carried her heavy shopping bags to the kitchen. Mrs. Eleanor thanked him with homemade cookies and a warm smile that reminded him of his late grandmother. From that simple act, an unexpected friendship began, one that would soon change both of their lives in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. The weeks passed quietly, and helping Mrs. Eleanor became part of Daniel's everyday routine. Some evenings he replaced burnt-out light bulbs, while on others he fixed a leaking faucet or trimmed the flowers in her small front garden. None of the tasks were difficult, but they made a huge difference to the elderly woman who no longer had the strength to do them herself. Mrs. Eleanor often invited him inside for tea after the work was finished. Their conversations rarely focused on hardship. Instead, they laughed about old neighborhood stories, shared memories of their families, and discussed Lily's dreams of becoming a veterinarian someday. "You've raised a wonderful little girl," Mrs. Eleanor said one evening. Daniel smiled proudly. "She's the reason I keep moving forward." Although life remained difficult, those simple visits reminded him that kindness could exist even during hard times. One afternoon, Daniel noticed Mrs. Eleanor standing by her mailbox with a worried expression. She was holding several envelopes, but one in particular had clearly upset her. "Bad news?" he asked softly. She hesitated before answering. "My daughter is finally coming to visit after almost a year. I want everything to be perfect, but my house has started falling apart. The porch railing is loose, the guest room needs cleaning, and I can't manage it by myself anymore." Daniel didn't think twice. "We'll have it ready before she arrives." The following day was his only afternoon off, yet he spent every hour at Mrs. Eleanor's home. He repaired the railing, cleaned dusty windows, tightened loose cabinet handles, mowed the lawn, and even rearranged old family photographs that had gathered dust on a shelf. When he noticed fresh flowers blooming beside the fence, he carefully picked a small bouquet and placed it in a glass vase on the dining table. The house felt alive again. Mrs. Eleanor looked around with tears shining in her eyes. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Daniel shook his head gently. "You already have. You treated me like family when I felt the whole world had forgotten me." She smiled, but there was something thoughtful behind her expression. My daughter has no idea who you are, she said quietly. But when she walks through that front door tomorrow, I have a feeling both of you will remember each other immediately. Daniel laughed, assuming she was joking. He couldn't imagine why a complete stranger would recognize him. Yet deep inside, an uneasy feeling settled in his chest, as if the past he had worked so hard to leave behind was about to knock on the door. The next afternoon, Daniel arrived a few minutes early with a fresh loaf of bread from the neighborhood bakery. Mrs. Eleanor had already prepared lunch, and the house looked brighter than it had in years. Sunlight poured through the clean windows, filling every room with warmth. "You've done more for this home than you realize," she said as she adjusted a framed family photograph on the mantel. Daniel smiled. "I'm just glad you're happy." A car pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Eleanor looked out the window and took a slow breath. "She's here." Daniel picked up his jacket. "I'll get going. You two have a lot to catch up on." Before he could reach the door, the front door swung open. A well-dressed woman stepped inside, holding her phone in one hand and a travel bag in the other. She stopped the moment she saw Daniel. The color drained from her face. Daniel froze as well. He recognized her instantly. Claire Morgan, the CEO who had signed the papers ending his 12-year career. For several seconds, no one spoke. Mrs. Eleanor looked from her daughter to Daniel with a puzzled smile. "You two know each other?" Claire slowly lowered her phone. "Yes," Daniel answered just as quietly. "We used to work at the same company." Mrs. Eleanor's smile faded as she sensed the tension filling the room. Claire looked around the spotless living room, noticing the repaired shelves, the polished furniture, the fresh flowers on the table, and the new porch light visible through the open doorway. "Who did all this?" she asked. Mrs. Eleanor pointed toward Daniel without hesitation. "He did. Every bit of it. He helps me almost every day, and he never accepts a single dollar." Claire stared at Daniel in disbelief. "You've been doing all this? After everything?" Daniel remained calm. "Your mother needed help. That was enough for me." There was no anger in his voice, only quiet honesty. Claire remembered the day she had dismissed him. At the time, she had convinced herself the layoffs were numbers on a spreadsheet. Standing in front of him now, she realized those numbers had faces, families, and lives. "You have a daughter, don't you?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Lily, she's the reason I kept going." Mrs. Eleanor looked at her daughter, confused. "Claire, what exactly happened between the two of you?" Claire couldn't answer immediately. For the first time since becoming CEO, she felt the full weight of a decision she had once called just business. Looking at the man who had continued choosing kindness despite losing everything, she understood that success meant very little if it came at the cost of forgetting people's humanity. Silence lingered in the room until Claire finally took a slow breath. She looked at her mother, then back at Daniel, unable to hide the regret in her eyes. "I owe you both an apology," she said quietly. "When I became CEO, I was obsessed with cutting costs and proving I could lead the company. I convinced myself that difficult decisions were easier if I didn't think about the people behind them." Daniel listened without interrupting. "I never imagined what happened after you left," Claire continued. "I didn't know you were raising Lily alone. I didn't know how much you had sacrificed." Daniel gave a small nod. "You couldn't have known. But every decision affects someone's life. That's easy to forget when you're sitting in an office." Mrs. Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "Success isn't measured by how many people work for you," she said softly. "It's measured by how many people trust you." Claire lowered her head. Those words hurt because they were true. A week later, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. Claire asked if he would be willing to visit the company, not for another interview, but for a conversation. Curious, he agreed. When he arrived, the atmosphere felt completely different from the day he had carried a cardboard box out of the building. Claire welcomed him personally and explained that the company had changed its direction. She wanted experienced leaders who understood not only business, but also compassion. "We'd like you to return as Director of Operations," she said. "The position comes with better pay, flexible hours, and full benefits. But if you decline, I'll understand. Daniel remained silent for a moment before answering. I'll accept on one condition. Claire looked surprised. Create a program that helps employees facing family emergencies instead of treating them like numbers. No one should feel invisible. Claire smiled for the first time that day. Done. Months later, Daniel was once again leading a team, but this time in a workplace where kindness was valued alongside performance. Mrs. Eleanor often watched from her porch as Daniel and Lily left for work and school with smiles on their faces. Life had not rewarded Daniel because he expected something in return. It rewarded him because he chose compassion, even when life had given him every reason to become bitter. In the end, the greatest act of leadership wasn't found in a corner office. It was found in the quiet decision to help someone who could never repay the favor.